Okay, so let's dive into this. Imagine, right, you're trying to secure a system. But it's not just any system. It's as complex as an entire city. Countless entry points, hidden passages, you name it, and weaknesses everywhere. That's kind of the challenge that cybersecurity professionals face every single day.
It is. It's a huge challenge, and it's constantly changing.
Exactly. And today, we're going to deep dive into a really interesting area of this penetration testing. Basically, it's ethical hacking. You're trying to find and fix those vulnerabilities, those weaknesses, before the bad guys can get to them.
It's like staying one step ahead, always anticipating what those with malicious intent might try.
Absolutely. And we have a fantastic guide for this deep dive. It's a recent German document. It's called Penetration Testing Tools, an overview for beginners and advanced users.
A really comprehensive resource.
It is. It's like a treasure trove of all the latest tools that people are using in cybersecurity, both, the good guys and the bad guys. And you might be surprised by how accessible some of these tools actually are. So where do we even begin with something as broad as penetration testing? What's a good starting point?
Well, I think a good place to start is with something that we encounter every day. Websites.
Okay, yeah. Websites. Makes sense. The digital storefronts, the information hubs, we use them constantly. So what are some of the tools that ethical hackers use to kind of probe for weaknesses in websites?
Well, one of the most popular and versatile tools is Burp Suite Pro.
Burp Suite Pro, okay.
It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife for hacking web applications. It can do it all. Intercept and modify traffic, scan for vulnerabilities, and even automate attacks. All ethically, of course.
A Swiss Army knife for hacking. That's an interesting analogy. Sounds pretty handy, even if it's for a job I wouldn't want. But what if you're just starting out in this field? Maybe you don't have the budget for a tool like Burp Suite Pro or something a little more, beginner friendly.
Definitely. Oh, VSP ZAP is a fantastic option. It's free, it's open source, and there's a huge community behind it.
Open source, always a good thing.
Absolutely. And one thing that's really interesting about ZAP is that it integrates really well with CI/CD pipelines, which is a big deal these days.
Okay, CI/CD, that's continuous integration, continuous delivery. I know it's huge in software development right now. It's all about automating the process of getting new code out quickly and efficiently, right? So how does a security tool like ZAP fit into that?
Imagine you have developers who are constantly pushing out updates to a web application. Each change, even a small one, could introduce new vulnerabilities.
Right. Makes sense.
By integrating ZAP into the CI/CD pipeline, every time new code is deployed, it automatically triggers a vulnerability scan. It's like having a tireless security guard, watching over your web application 24/7, catching those flaws early before they can become a real problem.
It's like a built-in safety net for the whole development process. That's pretty impressive. But I'm guessing sometimes you need something even faster, like a quick scan, a checkup, for those really obvious vulnerabilities. What would you use for that?
For that, we have Nikto. It's specifically designed for web servers and is incredibly fast at finding common vulnerabilities that are often overlooked.
So it's like a quick triage for your web server security.
Precisely.
Speed is key. Got it. Now, let's say you're dealing with a large organization. They've got tons of web applications. You need a tool that can handle that kind of scale, right?
Right. For larger organizations, Equinetics is a popular choice. It has a massive database of known vulnerabilities, which makes its scans really accurate and thorough, even for complex web environments. And just like ZAP, it integrates into CI/CD pipelines, so you have that continuous monitoring.
So it's like having a whole team of expert security analysts working nonstop in the background. That's pretty reassuring, actually. Now, I've heard the terms static and dynamic analysis thrown around in cybersecurity. Can you explain what those mean? And are there tools that do both?
Yeah, those are important concepts. Static analysis is like taking an X-ray of the code. You're examining it for weaknesses, but you're not actually running the application.
Right.
Dynamic analysis, on the other hand, is like a stress test. You're observing the application in action to see how it behaves under pressure.
Okay. So one's looking at the blueprint, the other's watching it run.
Exactly. And HTL AppScan is a good example of a tool that can do both. It gives you a really comprehensive view of an application's security. And what's great is that it integrates into the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, which aligns with that shift left concept we talked about earlier.
Yeah, building security into the process from the very beginning. So it's like a complete health checkup for your web application. You're looking at the code itself and how it actually functions in the real world.
Precisely. And as technology keeps evolving, we need tools that can keep up. That's where something like WeFuzz comes in.
WeFuzz.
Think,
No.
think of it as a way to push the boundaries to see what breaks. It sends a massive amount of unexpected data to a web app to see how it responds.
So it's like you're intentionally trying to break things to see where the weaknesses are.
Exactly. And what makes WeFuzz really powerful is that it can handle so many different protocols. It's super adaptable.
So it's all about flexibility. Got it. We've talked about tools that scan, that stress test, that, well, fuzz. What other techniques do ethical hackers use?
Well, sometimes, before you even launch an attack, you need to gather information. That's where Amass comes in.
Amass. Okay, tell me more.
It's all about reconnaissance, like a detective gathering clues. Amass searches through all sorts of sources, public records, social media, you name it, to try to collect as much information as possible about a target.
So Amass is like the Sherlock Holmes of penetration testing.
You could say that.
It's amazing how much information is out there just waiting to be discovered.
It is. And knowing your target inside and out is critical for effective testing.
That makes sense. So we've gathered information, we've scanned for vulnerabilities, we've even tried to break things. What happens next?
Well, at some point, you need to prove that a vulnerability actually exists.
Right. You need to show that it's not just a theoretical weakness.
Exactly. And that's where a tool like NetSparker comes in.
NetSparker. Okay. What's special about that one?
It's known for its accuracy. It minimizes those false positives that can waste so much time. But what's really impressive is that it can generate what are called proof-of-concept exploits.
Proof-of-concept exploits. Now that sounds serious. What are those?
Imagine you tell a developer, hey, I think there's a vulnerability in your code. But they don't believe you.
Happens all the time, I'm sure.
NetSparker can actually demonstrate the exploit. It shows exactly how that vulnerability could be used to compromise the application.
Wow. So it's not just about finding flaws, it's about showing the developers in a very concrete way what the real-world consequences could be.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to get security issues taken seriously.
Yeah, I bet it is. So NetSparker is like a security consultant that provides a really detailed blueprint of an application's strengths and weaknesses.
That's a great analogy. And remember, web applications are just one part of the puzzle. The digital world is vast, and we've got lots more ground to cover.
All right, I'm ready to dive deeper. What's next on our penetration testing adventure?
Well, considering how much we rely on them these days, I think it's time we explore the world of mobile app security.
Smartphones, those tiny computers we carry around everywhere, can't wait to see what kinds of vulnerabilities lurk in those apps.
Yeah, mobile app security is a whole other world. And to be honest, it can be a bit concerning. You might be surprised how vulnerable some of those apps we use every day actually are.
It is a little unsettling when you think about it. All those apps we use for banking, social media, everything. Where do we even start with testing something that's so, I don't know, ingrained in our lives?
Well, just like with web applications, there are tools for both static and dynamic analysis. MobSF is a good example. It's open source, user-friendly, and it supports both Android and iOS.
Okay, covering all the bases. It is interesting how a lot of these principles apply across different platforms, but mobile apps, they feel so much more personal. I mean, it's kind of unnerving to think about, potential vulnerabilities lurking in the apps that we use every single day.
Yeah, I get that. It's a valid concern. That's why this kind of testing is so important. And if you really want to dig deep into how an app works, Frida is an incredibly powerful tool.
Frida. Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Imagine being able to inject code into a running app to see exactly what's happening behind the scenes. That's what Frida lets you do. It's called dynamic instrumentation, and it gives security researchers incredible insights into an app's behavior. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a tool that should be used with caution.
I'm sensing a theme here. Powerful tools that can be used for good or bad. It's a constant back and forth.
It is a constant back and forth. Now let's talk about APK Tool. It's specifically designed for Android apps, and it lets you decompile APK files.
Okay, so basically you're breaking the app down into its core components, right? What would be the purpose of doing that?
Think of it like taking apart a clock to see how the gears work together. By decompiling an app, security researchers can analyze the code to look for vulnerabilities, understand how the app functions, maybe even modify it.
So you're reverse engineering the app to understand how it ticks. And if we're talking about understanding code, I imagine there are specific tools for different programming languages.
Right. You're absolutely right. JADX is a great example. It's designed for decompiling Java code, which is widely used in Android app development.
Okay, so it's like translating the app's language into something that humans can actually understand.
Exactly. It's essential for spotting those hidden flaws.
Makes sense. So we've got tools for analyzing code, both statically and dynamically. What other tricks do mobile app security researchers have up their sleeves?
Well, you can't talk about Android security without mentioning rooting. And Magisk Root is a popular tool for that. It lets you root Android devices while preserving something called SafetyNet.
Rooting and safety net. Taking me back to my early tech days. Can you refresh my memory on those?
Of course. So rooting basically gives you full admin control over an Android device.
Right, like super user permissions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a lot of apps, especially those that deal with sensitive data like banking apps, they use SafetyNet to detect if a device has been rooted. They might refuse to work on a rooted device because they assume it's been compromised.
So it's a security measure to prevent tampered devices from accessing sensitive data.
Exactly. And that's where Magisk Root comes in. It's clever because it lets you root your device, but it hides that fact from SafetyNet.
Oh, sneaky.
It is. And it's really useful for security researchers.
Yeah.
Because they might need root access for in-depth testing, but they also need to be able to analyze those apps that require SafetyNet to be intact.
So it's like going undercover in the mobile security world. I like it. We talked about those APK files earlier, those Android app packages. What about actually tweaking or modifying those files?
For that, we have APKK. It's got a really user-friendly interface for inspecting and modifying APK files. Researchers can experiment with different settings, analyze the app's resources, even repackage the app with modifications.
So it's like a workshop for tinkering with Android apps. Earlier you mentioned tools that are primarily used for development. Can those be used for security testing too?
Absolutely. Tools like Android Studio and Genemotion, they're primarily for app development, but they can be really valuable for security testing as well.
It makes sense. To understand how to break something, it helps to know how it was built.
Exactly. And of course, there are also tools that are specifically designed for Android security assessments, like Drozer, for example.
Drozer, okay.
It's a framework that comes with a whole bunch of modules for testing different aspects of an app. Its permissions, how it stores data, its communication protocols.
So it's a specialized toolkit for Android security pros. Speaking of communication, I imagine analyzing how an app communicates with the outside world is pretty crucial, right?
It is. And Mitma Proxy is a powerful tool for that. It lets researchers intercept and modify the network traffic between an app and a server.
So you're basically eavesdropping on the app's conversations to see if it's spilling any secrets.
Exactly. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the code, there's Objection.
Objection.
It's another powerful tool. It builds on Frida, and it provides a really powerful scripting language for digging deep into an app's behavior.
So Objection is for the more advanced users, the ones who can really speak the app's language.
You could say that,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't forget about the basics. Add, the Android Debug Bridge, is a standard tool for interacting with Android devices.
Okay, AdB, I've heard of that.
It's incredibly versatile. You can install and debug apps, access the file system, and much more. It's essential for Android security work.
It's like a universal remote control for Android devices. So we've talked a lot about Android. What about iOS, the other half of the smartphone world?
Right. iOS security is a different beast, with its own set of tools and techniques. For example, there's Sitecrypt.
Sitecrypt, all right.
It's a powerful scripting language that allows for real-time interaction with iOS apps.
Real-time interaction, so you can see what's happening inside the app as it's running.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's great for dynamic analysis. It's similar to what Frida does for Android.
So it's like having a window into the soul of the app, but what if you need to go beyond just observing?
Well, then there's iOS Hook. It lets you actually modify an app's behavior on the fly.
Wow, so you're basically tricking the app into doing things it shouldn't be able to do.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to test for vulnerabilities.
So you're creating controlled chaos to see how the app reacts.
You could put it that way. If you're looking for a more structured approach to iOS security assessments, Needle is a good option. It's a framework that provides a more guided approach to testing iOS apps.
Okay, so Needle is like a guided tour through the potential security pitfalls of iOS apps.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And remember how we talked about decompiling Android apps to analyze the code? Well, for iOS, there's a tool called ClassDump.
ClassDump, okay.
It extracts information about Objective-C classes, which are a key part of iOS apps.
Objective-C, the language of the iOS world. So ClassDump is like the Rosetta Stone for understanding iOS app code.
Exactly. By understanding those classes, researchers can get a really good understanding of how an app works and maybe spot vulnerabilities.
So many different tools, each revealing a different layer of the app. It's amazing how interconnected they all are.
They are. And to make things even more user-friendly, There's the Objection Mobile Assistant. Remember Objection, the powerful scripting tool?
Yes.
The mobile assistant basically gives it a graphical user interface. Makes it much more approachable for people who might be intimidated by command line interfaces.
So it's like taking a powerful race car and adding automatic transmission. Still powerful, but a lot easier to handle. It sounds like there are so many different approaches to mobile app security testing.
There are. And sometimes you need to get a bit more invasive to really understand what's going on.
Invasive, okay, I'm intrigued, but also a little scared. What do you mean?
Well, remember how we talked about encryption being such a crucial part of security?
Yeah, of course.
For testing purposes, sometimes you actually need to disable it.
Disable encryption. That sounds risky.
It's definitely not something to be done lightly. But tools like SSL Kill Switch let researchers do just that. For testing purposes only, of course.
Right, of course.
By removing that layer of protection, they can analyze the raw data that's being transmitted, which can sometimes reveal hidden vulnerabilities.
So you're like taking off the app's armor to see if there are any weak spots underneath?
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
But definitely a technique that should only be used in very controlled environments.
I can imagine. Finally, let's talk about Amazing. Isn't that primarily for managing iOS devices?
It is, but it can actually be really useful for security testing as well. It has a lot of features for backing up and restoring iOS devices, which can be helpful for things like forensic analysis and data extraction.
So it's like a Swiss Army knife for iOS device management with some hidden security features tucked away?
Yeah, you could say that. It's a surprisingly versatile tool.
This has been a wild ride through mobile app security. Decompiling apps, rooting devices, disabling encryption. It's amazing what you can do with the right tools. What other digital frontiers are out there for us to explore?
Well, considering how much of our digital lives rely on them, I think it's time we venture into the world of API penetration testing.
APIs, those mysterious behind-the-scenes connections that power so much of the internet. All right, let's pull back the curtain and see what's going on. All right, APIs. They sound kind of mysterious, like something out of a sci-fi movie. These hidden pathways connecting different parts of the internet. What exactly are they, and why are they so important from a security standpoint?
Yeah, they are kind of like the hidden infrastructure of the internet. APIs, or application programming interfaces, allow different software systems to talk to each other. So think about when you use your Facebook account to log into a website.
Right.
That's made possible by an API.
So it's like a universal translator for different software systems.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But why are APIs a prime target for hackers? What makes them so vulnerable?
Well, they often handle sensitive data, and they provide access to a system's core functions. So if an attacker can exploit a vulnerability in an API, they could potentially gain access to valuable information or even take control of the entire system.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty serious. So how do we even go about testing the security of these hidden internet highways?
Well, thankfully, there are specialized tools for that. One of the most popular is Postman.
Postman, okay.
While it's primarily used by developers for building and testing APIs, it's also a really great tool for security assessments.
Wait, so a tool that's used to create APIs can also be used to test their security. That's kind of fascinating.
It is. It's all about perspective. Yeah. Understanding how something is built can give you insights into how to break it. And Postman's really user-friendly. It's got a huge community behind it, so it's a great starting point for API security testing.
It's like a friendly gateway into the complex world of APIs. What about for people who prefer open source tools? Are there options out there?
Absolutely. Insomnia is a fantastic open source alternative to Postman. And it's cross-platform, so you can use it on just about any operating system.
All right, so open source cross-platform, that's great. Are there tools that are specifically designed for, like, comprehensive API security testing?
Yeah, for sure. 42Crunch API Security is a great example. It's entirely focused on API security, and it offers a whole range of features, from automated testing to vulnerability management. It even integrates with those CI/CD pipelines we talked about earlier.
CI/CD just keeps popping up everywhere, doesn't it?
It does.
It really highlights how important it is to integrate security into every stage of the development process. Catch those issues early.
Absolutely. The earlier, the better. Now, if you're working with RESTful APIs, which are incredibly common, Swagger Inspector is a must-have.
RESTful APIs, another term for the glossary. What makes them so special?
RESTful APIs follow a specific architectural style, a really widely used one, and Swagger Inspector is designed specifically for testing and debugging these types of APIs.
So it's a specialized toolkit for a specific type of API. Makes sense. I'm always a fan of automation, so are there tools that can kind of streamline this whole process of API security testing?
For sure. Kite Runner is a great example. It automates a lot of the common tasks involved in API security testing, and it can quickly identify common vulnerabilities. Saves you a lot of time and effort.
That definitely frees up security professionals to focus on the trickier challenges. What about actually seeing the traffic that flows through these APIs? Is there a way to kind of watch what's happening in real time?
Yes, there is. CCAP's Intercept. It acts as a man-in-the-middle proxy, so it can intercept and modify API traffic.
Oh, wow.
It's a powerful way to understand how APIs communicate and to potentially reveal vulnerabilities.
So it's like setting up a security camera on those hidden API pathways.
Exactly. You can see who's coming and going, what they're carrying. It's crucial for understanding how APIs work and making sure they're secure.
Okay, this is all really fascinating. But remember, APIs are just one layer of this whole digital world. The code that powers those APIs also needs to be secure, right? Which I guess leads us to secure code review.
That's right. Secure code review is all about examining the source code of an application, looking for vulnerabilities before they can be exploited.
So we're going even deeper now, looking at the building blocks of these digital systems. I'm ready to put on my code reading glasses.
Well, you'll need them.
Yeah.
Let's start with SonarQube. It's a platform that helps developers write cleaner, safer code.
Okay.
It's not just about finding vulnerabilities. It also gives you insights into code quality, complexity, maintainability, all that good stuff.
So it's like a code quality coach helping developers improve their coding habits. That's a really proactive approach to security.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And to address those open source vulnerabilities, we have SNCC. It focuses on finding and fixing security flaws in those open source libraries that are so widely used in software development.
Right, open source libraries. Those are kind of like pre-built components that developers can use in their projects, right?
Exactly. They save a lot of time and effort. But like any code, they can contain vulnerabilities. SNCC helps you identify and manage those vulnerabilities so you can be confident that the open source components you're using are secure.
It's like a security check for all the ingredients that go into building the software. What about tools that can analyze different types of code, not just specific languages or libraries?
SEMREP is a great example. It uses a flexible, rule-based approach to static code analysis, so it can be customized to find specific types of vulnerabilities or coding errors.
So it's a customizable code scanner. That's handy.
It is. Flexibility is key. And speaking of flexibility, Checkmarx is another powerful tool. It does both static and dynamic code analysis, and it's known for its scalability. So it's really well suited for large organizations that have complex code bases.
So it's like the industrial strength code scanner.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a cloud-based solution, Veracode is a popular choice.
Cloud-based. Okay, so the analysis happens remotely. You don't have to install anything locally.
That's right. Veracode provides both static and dynamic analysis as a service. So it's really easy to integrate code security into your workflows without having to worry about managing infrastructure.
It's like security testing on demand. Pretty cool. So we're seeing the cloud playing an increasingly important role in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Now let's shift back to web applications for a moment.
Mhm.
Fortify Web Inspect Audit is a tool that's specifically designed for static code analysis of web apps.
Fortify Web Inspect. Didn't we talk about that earlier?
We did. We talked about Fortify Web Inspect when we were discussing web application penetration testing.
Right.
This particular tool focuses solely on the static code analysis part, giving you a really deep dive into the code itself to uncover potential vulnerabilities.
Okay, so it's like a specialized member of the Fortify family focused on code-level security.
Exactly. Now, for those who really want to get into the weeds of code analysis, there's CodeQL.
CodeQL. Okay, what's special about that one?
It's more than just a tool. It's like a whole new way of thinking about code analysis. It uses a really powerful query language to analyze code, allowing researchers to express complex security queries and find vulnerabilities that traditional tools might miss.
So it's like a search engine for vulnerabilities, but instead of using keywords, you're using code queries. That's really powerful.
It's a game changer for code security.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, we talked about how there are specialized tools for specific programming languages, like in mobile app testing. Is that the same for code review?
That's a great point. Are there tools that are specifically tailored for certain programming languages?
Absolutely. Bandit is a good example. It's designed specifically for Python code analysis.
Python, that's a really popular language these days.
It is, and Bandit can automatically catch a lot of the common security flaws that pop up in Python code.
So it's like a Python security linter. Make sure developers are following the rules.
Exactly. And for Java developers, there's Find Bugs. It's been helping developers find bugs in Java code for years and years.
Java, the language that powers so much of the internet. It's good to know there are tools out there dedicated to keeping it secure. What about tools that can help prevent data leaks?
Good question. GitLeaks is a tool that helps prevent sensitive information from being accidentally committed to Git repositories.
Okay, Git repositories, those are the version control systems that developers use, right?
Exactly. Developers use Git to track changes to their code to collaborate with each other. But sometimes sensitive information like API keys or passwords can accidentally end up in those repositories. GitLeaks scans for those kinds of leaks, helping developers catch them before they can be exploited.
So it's like a safety net for careless developers. Prevents them from exposing sensitive information. Very important in this day and age.
Absolutely. But remember, code is just one part of the software ecosystem. We also need to think about the security of the systems that code runs on, which leads us to thick client penetration testing.
Thick client penetration testing. Okay, I'm guessing we're moving beyond web and mobile apps now.
We are. Thick client applications. Those are the traditional desktop applications. Things like word processors, spreadsheets, even video games.
Right, the classic software that we've been using for decades. How do you test the security of those programs?
A lot of the same techniques we've already talked about still apply, like static and dynamic analysis. But there are also tools that are specifically designed for thick client applications. Fiddler, for example, is a web debugging tool that can also be used to intercept and modify traffic from thick client apps that use HTTP.
So it's a multi-purpose tool, can be used for both web apps and thick client apps.
Exactly. Versatility is always a good thing. And for those who need to dig deep into .NET applications, there's DNSpy.
.NET applications. Remind me what those are again.
.NET is a software framework developed by Microsoft. It's used a lot for building Windows applications. And DNSpy lets you decompile those applications and debug them, giving you a really good understanding of how they work and potentially uncovering vulnerabilities.
So it's like a window into the world of .NET applications. And if we're talking about reverse engineering, we can't forget about IDEA Pro and Ghidra.
Those are the heavy hitters. IDEA Pro is the industry standard. It's a really powerful disassembler and debugger. And Ghidra is a fantastic open source alternative.
They're like the master keys for unlocking the secrets of any software.
Powerful tools. And to understand the system as a whole, the bigger picture, there's Process Explorer.
Process Explorer.
I give you a detailed view of all the processes that are running on a computer, including how they're related to each other, how they depend on each other.
So it's like a map of the system's activities, showing you all those interactions between processes. Why is that important from a security perspective?
Well, by understanding how those processes work, you can start to identify suspicious activity. You can track down malware. You can analyze how vulnerabilities might be exploited.
So it's all about connecting those dots. What about tools for analyzing specific files?
For that, there's CFF Explorer. It's great for analyzing and editing resources in PE files, which is a common file format for Windows applications.
Okay.
It can reveal a lot of information about the application structure and potentially uncover hidden functions or vulnerabilities.
So it's like a digital scalpel, ready to dissect those Windows applications. And then to actually dig into the code itself, we need debuggers, right?
Debuggers are essential. They let you step through the code, line by line, to see how it executes. Helps you pinpoint exactly where a vulnerability lies. OllyDbg is a classic, user-friendly debugger. And by N64, DBG is a more modern option.
So they're like time machines for code.
That's a great analogy. And of course, we can't forget about Wireshark, the network traffic analyzer.
Wireshark's back, so it plays a role in thick client security too.
Absolutely. By analyzing the network traffic, you can spot suspicious communication patterns, data leaks, all sorts of things.
It's like having a security camera watching all the data flowing in and out of the application.
Exactly. It's amazing how all these different areas of cybersecurity are so interconnected.
They really are. All right, so we've covered web applications, mobile apps, thick clients. Now it's time to go even bigger. What about network penetration testing? What are some of the tools and techniques that are used to assess the security of entire networks?
Network security is absolutely critical. And to test it effectively, we need the right tools. So let's start with a familiar friend, Nmap.
Nmap, the network and port scanning tool. We've bumped into it a few times already on this journey.
Yeah, it's essential for any network security assessment. Nmap can quickly discover devices on a network, identify open ports, even fingerprint operating systems and services. It's like a reconnaissance mission for your network.
Okay, so Nmap is the scout, mapping out the terrain.
Exactly. And once we have that map, We can bring in Wireshark to analyze the traffic.
Oh, Wireshark again. So it plays a role in network security, too.
It's incredibly versatile.
Right.
In this context, it's used to identify suspicious activity, analyze those communication patterns, and uncover vulnerabilities in network protocols.
So it's like a security camera, but instead of looking for physical intruders, it's looking for digital anomalies.
Exactly. It's all about understanding how data flows through your network. And then if you really want to simulate real-world attacks, there's the Metasploit framework.
Metasploit framework. That's a name I've heard before. Isn't that something that hackers use?
It could be used by both ethical hackers and malicious actors. In the context of penetration testing, it's incredibly valuable for simulating attacks, exploiting vulnerabilities, verifying the effectiveness of your security controls.
So it's a double-edged sword. Powerful, but potentially dangerous.
Definitely a tool that should only be used by experienced professionals. Now let's talk about vulnerability scanners. Nessus is a popular commercial tool. It can scan your network for a wide range of vulnerabilities.
Vulnerability scanners, so these are kind of like automated security auditors.
Exactly. Nessus has a huge database of known vulnerabilities, and it can quickly scan your entire network, identifying potential security risks.
Sounds incredibly useful. Are there open source alternatives?
Yes, OpenVS is a great open source alternative to Nessus. It's actively maintained by a large community, and it offers really comprehensive vulnerability scanning.
So community-driven security, keeping networks safe through collaboration. I love that. Now, we've talked about scanning for known vulnerabilities. Are there other techniques that are used in network penetration testing?
Absolutely. Let's talk about something called LMNRNBTNS poisoning.
Okay, LLMNRNBTNS poisoning. That's a mouthful.
It is a bit technical, but essentially it's a technique that tricks computers on a network into revealing their login credentials.
Oh, wow. So how do you test for that?
There's a tool called Responder. It basically sets up a rogue server that can intercept those requests and capture usernames and passwords.
It's kind of like setting up a fake Wi-Fi hotspot to steal people's login information.
It's a pretty common technique.
Yeah.
And Responder allows security professionals to test their defenses against it.
Right. Fighting fire with fire. So we've talked about vulnerability scanners. We've talked about LMNR poisoning. What other tools are in the network penetration tester's arsenal?
CrackMapExec is another one that can be used ethically. It automates password cracking attacks.
Password cracking. So you're testing the strengths of the passwords, seeing which ones are vulnerable to brute force attacks.
Exactly. And then for Active Directory environments, there's Bloodhound.
Active Directory, that's used by a lot of organizations to manage user accounts and permissions, right?
That's right. And Bloodhound analyzes your Active Directory environment and creates a visual representation of how an attacker might move within your network.
So it's like a roadmap of potential attack path.
Exactly. It shows you how an attacker might be able to exploit weaknesses in user permissions or group memberships.
Really helps you understand the security of your Active Directory environment. So we've covered vulnerability scanners, password cracking, Active Directory analysis. What else?
Well, no discussion of network penetration testing would be complete without mentioning Netcat and BetterCap.
Netcat, the network Swiss Army knife. And BetterCap, I haven't heard of that one.
Netcat is incredibly versatile. It can be used for a wide range of network tasks, from port scanning to transferring files to even creating backdoors.
Wow.
BetterCap is a more modern and powerful tool with advanced features for network monitoring, manipulation, and attack simulation.
So they're kind of like the ultimate network toolkits.
Exactly. But remember, networks are just one piece of the puzzle. These days, we also need to consider the security of the cloud, which brings us to cloud security.
The cloud. That mysterious place where all our data seems to live these days. How do you even begin to secure something that's so vast and intangible?
It's definitely a different beast, but thankfully there are specialized tools to help us. Let's start with Prowler.
Prowler, okay.
It's an open source tool that's specifically designed for AWS security audits.
AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, the biggest cloud provider out there.
That's right. And Prowler can automatically check for security misconfigurations in those environments.
So it's like a watchdog for your AWS environment, making sure everything is locked down tight.
Exactly. And if you need to assess the security of multiple cloud providers, there's Scout Suite. It supports AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform.
Multi-cloud support. It's essential these days.
It is. You need the right tool for the job no matter where your data lives. And then there's CloudSploit. It's another fantastic open source tool for finding security issues in AWS, Azure, and GCP. It's constantly updated to keep pace with the evolving cloud security landscape.
Sounds like a real workhorse. Now we're getting into some pretty advanced territory here. Are there tools that are even more specialized?
Absolutely. Pacu, for example, is a really powerful PowerShell script. It's specifically designed for post-exploitation in AWS environments.
Post-exploitation, so this is after an attacker has already gained access to an AWS environment.
Exactly. Post-exploitation tools are used to explore that compromised environment, to escalate privileges, to potentially gain access to even more sensitive data or systems. Pacu lets security professionals simulate these scenarios so they can understand how an attacker might move within their AWS environment.
So it's like a virtual war game for cloud security. Pretty intense stuff. But before you even get to that point, you need to understand your cloud environment, right?
Absolutely. SteamPipe is a great tool for that. It can efficiently enumerate AWS resources.
Enumerate AWS resources? What does that even mean?
Basically, it means identifying and cataloging all the different components that make up your AWS environment.
Okay, so like taking inventory of your cloud assets.
Exactly. And to make that inventory easier to understand, CloudMapper provides a visual representation of those resources, creates these interactive diagrams that help you understand the relationships between different components.
So it's a map of your cloud environment. Very cool.
Visualizations can be incredibly helpful. Now, if you're looking for a commercial solution for cloud security assessments, NCC Group Scout is a popular choice. It's used by a lot of large organizations.
Sounds like having a team of cloud security consultants at your fingertips.
It's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember Kubernetes, the container orchestration platform?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Well, KubeBench is a great tool for auditing the security configuration of your Kubernetes clusters.
Okay, Kubernetes clusters. This is getting pretty technical.
Kubernetes is basically a way to manage containerized applications. It's really popular, but like any complex system, it can have security vulnerabilities.
Right.
KubeBench helps you identify and fix those.
So it's like a Kubernetes security checklist.
Exactly. And with that, we've covered a lot of ground in cloud security. But the journey isn't over yet. We have one more stop: container security.
Containers, those lightweight packages of software that everyone seems to be talking about these days, what kinds of security challenges do they bring?
Containers are definitely changing the way we develop software, but they also introduce new security concerns. So let's start with Trivy. It's an open source tool for vulnerability scanning.
Vulnerability scanning, again. So is this like the Nessus or OpenVAS, but for containers?
You could say that. Trivy scans your container images for known vulnerabilities, helps you identify and fix security risks before you deploy those containers. And it supports both containers and Kubernetes.
So it's like a security checkpoint for your containers, making sure they're safe to deploy.
Exactly. And if you're really focused on speed and integration, Aqua Microscanner is another great option.
Aqua Microscanner, okay.
It's designed to be incredibly fast and to integrate easily into those CI/CD pipelines.
So it's like security scanning built right into the container assembly line.
Exactly. Now let's talk about runtime security. Falco is an open source tool that can detect suspicious behavior in your containers once they're already running.
Runtime security. So it's not just about scanning for vulnerabilities before you deploy, but also monitoring them in real time.
Exactly. Falco can detect things like unexpected network connections, processes being executed, file system changes, all sorts of things. It alerts you to potential attacks in real time.
So it's like having a security guard watching for any suspicious activity inside each container.
Exactly. And if you're looking for a commercial solution for container security monitoring, Sysdig is a good one.
Sysdig, okay.
It provides really deep visibility into your containerized environments, allowing you to monitor performance, troubleshoot problems, detect security threats. It's got a whole range of features.
The ultimate control panel for your containerized world.
It's powerful. And remember SNCC, the tool we talked about earlier for finding vulnerabilities in open source libraries.
Yeah, SNCC seems to do a bit of everything.
It's a versatile tool. It can also scan your container images for known vulnerabilities in those open source components.
So it's like having a security consultant review all the ingredients that go into building your containers.
That's a good way to put it. Now back to Kubernetes security for a moment. There's a tool called Bench. It checks your Kubernetes deployments for compliance with security best practices.
So it's like a Kubernetes security audit checklist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's KubeHunter. It's specifically designed to find misconfigurations in your Kubernetes deployments.
So it's like a Kubernetes security detective looking for those subtle clues that something might be wrong.
Exactly. And remember, Claire, the open source vulnerability scanner that we talked about earlier.
Claire, yeah, I think that came up when we were discussing web application security.
That's right. It's a really versatile tool. It can also be used for container image scanning. It's got an API-based design, which makes it really easy to integrate into other tools and workflows.
So it's a modular security scanning component. You can plug it into different systems.
Exactly. Flexibility is key. And speaking of comprehensive solutions, Anchor is a commercial platform that provides in-depth security analysis of container images.
Anchor, okay, another tool for the container security toolkit. What makes it different?
Anchor goes beyond vulnerability scanning. It lets you define security policies and actually enforce them on your container images, so you can be sure that only containers that meet your standards are deployed.
So it's like a security gatekeeper for your container registry.
That's a good way to put it. And finally, we can't forget about Docker itself.
Docker, that's the platform that makes all this containerization possible in the first place, right? But it's not really a security tool.
That's right. But understanding how Docker works is essential for securing your containers. By learning how to properly configure Docker images and containers, you can significantly reduce your attack surface.
So security really starts with understanding the fundamentals.
Exactly. And with that, our journey through the world of penetration testing tools comes to an end.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour. From web applications to mobile apps, APIs, code review, thick clients, networks, cloud security, containers. It's incredible how many tools and techniques are used in this field. What really stood out to you?
For me, it's the sheer variety of tools and the fact that they're constantly evolving. The cybersecurity landscape is always changing, but the fundamental principles remain the same. Identify vulnerabilities, understand the risks, and take steps to mitigate them.
Absolutely. It's a constant cat and mouse game, but knowing how attackers think and what tools they use is crucial for building strong security. So to our listener, what was your biggest takeaway from this deep dive? What sparked your curiosity? Maybe you're inspired to try out one of those open source tools we talked about, or maybe you want to delve deeper into a particular area of cybersecurity that caught your attention.
Whatever it is, keep learning, keep exploring. The world of penetration testing is vast and always evolving.
And with so much at stake in our digital lives these days, understanding these tools and techniques is more important than ever.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.